This is a kind of object that you're probably all familiar with when you had the term robot, but I'm gonna show you the very first robots. These were the very first robots. They were characters in a play in the 1920s called Rossum's Universal Robots, and the play was written by Czech writer called Karel Čapek. And basically, these robots, people tend to think of robots as kind of cute cuddly toys or, Hollywood depictions kinda devoid of politics. But the first robots were actually created and imagined in a time of absolute political turmoil. You just had the First World War, it finished, had a devastating impact across Europe, and so people are kind of reflecting on what does it mean to be human, what makes us human, those kinds of question. And this kind of context is what inspired Čapek to kind of write this play. And interestingly, these robots being human, they are actually in the play assembled on a production line, a bit like the Ford manufacturing production line. So even though they are human, they are assembled, and these robots are designed to labor, and that is their primary purpose in society.
The impact on young Australians who are interested in buying a home of their own has been very significant. Australia's housing affordability now shapes the typical housing cycle, or housing career as some people call it. Most Australians in the normal course of events are people who move through the housing cycle in a way that matches the stages of life that they're at. So, they move out of the family home in their late teens or early 20s as they gain their independence from their families, then they rent-save for a home they can afford as either a group, or maybe a couple. And maybe they can upgrade it when they have a family in their middle age. They are more than likely to have paid off their mortgage. And that means they have housing security in their old age. That's no longer the typical housing cycle for Australians. Young people generally live at home for much longer than they once did. They generally rent for longer, and they're more likely to be saddled with a mortgage not just into their middle age but more often than not into their retirement as well. In fact, in 2006, 65,000 retiree households were still paying off the mortgage. Affordable rent is also an elusive right around Australia. We have very low rental vacancies, we see high turnover as landlords want to maximise their profits in tight market, and we see less long-term or lifelong rental, as we see in other countries and other economies.
There comes a time in a desert ant's life when a piece of food is too large to ignore, but too heavy to lift, and the only way to get it home is to adopt a new style of walking. The long-legged and speedy Cataglyphus fortis normally covers ground with a three-legged stride that moves two legs forwards on one side, and one on the other. For the next step, the insect mirrors the move with its other three legs. But recordings of ants in the Tunisian desert reveal that when faced with oversized lumps of food, 10 times their own weight, the forward, tripod, walking style is abandoned. Unable to lift the morsels in their mandibles, the ants drag the food backwards instead, moving all 6 legs independently. This is the first time we have seen this in any ants, said lead author Sarah Pfeffer at the University of Ulm in Germany. The ants' long legs already help keep their bodies away from the scorching desert floor and enable them to speed around at up to 60 centimeters per second. Think of Usain Bolt, who has very long legs. Compared to body size, the desert floor is also very hot, so the further away their bodies are from the surface, the better, said co-author Matthias Wittlinger. The ants have also evolved to function at body temperatures of 50 C in a desert where temperatures can soar to 70 C. They're basically just trying to get out of the heat, he added.
Turner, not surprisingly, painted one of the earliest pictures of London's fog, in the 1835 painting The Thames Above Waterloo Bridge. Turner is a true-born Londoner, is advertising his familiarity with London's air problem by putting smoke, and atmospheric pollution at its centre. And as you can see, in here, the bridge is the central elements, which is a theme that's later taken up by Monet. And it's partly obscured by the steam and smoke which rises from both sides of the river. Here, we see a shot tower. I think you can just about to see, which was constructed in 1826. Do you know what shot towers are? They produce shot for guns, ammunition. And they were very smoky, one of the more smoking industries. But it's barely visible, as you can see, as are the various industries on the Lambeth side of the river. On this side, there's a steamship about to dock or preparing to leave. It's black smoke thrusting up to join the kind of swirling arc of smoke there. William Rodner sees this painting as a potent essay on the energy and complexity of modern polluted organism. Smoke, I think, here represents for a flourishing economy, which brings employment and food on tables, but also the dirt and pollution associated with the fumes all seems to be tainted by sulfurous yellow.
Frogs are a diverse and largely carnivorous group of short-bodied, tailless amphibians composing the order Anura. The oldest fossil protofrog appeared in the early Triassic of Madagascar, but molecular clock dating suggests their origins may extend further back to the Permian, 265 million years ago. Frogs are widely distributed, ranging from the tropics to subarctic regions, but the greatest concentration of species diversity is found in tropical rainforests. There are approximately 4,800 recorded species, accounting for over 85% of extant amphibian species. They are also one of the 5 most diverse vertebrate orders. Besides living in fresh water and on dry land, the adults of some species are adapted for living underground or in trees. Adult frogs generally have a carnivorous diet, consisting of small invertebrates, but omnivorous species exist and a few feed on fruit. Frogs are extremely efficient at converting what they eat into body mass. They are an important food source for predators and part of the food web dynamics of many of the world's ecosystems. The skin is semi-permeable, making them susceptible to dehydration, so they either live in moist places or have special adaptations to deal with dry habitats. Frogs produce a wide range of vocalizations, particularly in their breeding season, and exhibit many different kinds of complex behaviors to attract mates, to fend off predators and to generally survive. Frog populations have declined significantly since the 1950s. More than 1/3 of species are considered to be threatened with extinction and over 120 are believed to have become extinct since the 1980s. Most Americans take energy for granted. But, for many families, maintaining access to reliable and affordable energy is a persistent challenge and a significant material hardship. This is a problem referred to as energy insecurity, and it affects millions of American households each year. We have found that energy insecurity is a growing and vexing problem among low-income households, and the COVID-19 pandemic has made this problem worse. Our analysis finds that there are disparities in rates of energy insecurity across various socio-demographic groups. Black and Hispanic households, for example, are significantly more likely to experience energy insecurity and face utility disconnection than white households. Settler households with young children, individuals that require electronic medical devices, and those in dwellings with inefficient or poor conditions. Households that cannot pay for energy or unable to power electronic learning or medical devices, keep perishable, healthy food in the refrigerator, or maintain safe body temperatures. Under conditions of extreme heat or cold, people can suffer from mental and physical health consequences, including the possibility of death. Strategies for coping with uncomfortable temperatures, such as burning trash or sitting in one's car with the heat running, can lead to tragic
Humans are pretty lucky with the way we can communicate. Unlike animals, we have the perfect length necks and excellent control of our breaths. Both of these characteristics allow us to form words. Although animals can't talk like us, they still have special ways to communicate. For example, dolphins have one of the most sophisticated forms of communication. They make distinct whistling sounds that help identify themselves. Dolphins may also squeak or yelp depending on the situation. Nevertheless, each sound releases meaningful information. You have probably heard some birds say words just like us, but they are merely repeating what they hear. Most birds communicate through songs and squawks that can be beautiful for us to listen to. Other animals communicate without making a sound. Elephants show affection by wrapping their trunks around each other. Whales leap out of the water to send messages to their friends. Bees perform a special dance when they have located nectar in a tree. Even if it's just our pet dog wagging his tail or a pet cat purring, all animals have their own way to convey information to us and each other. Let's look at the size of rain, and how raindrops fall. First, we'll need the sun. When the sun shines on water on the Earth's surface, the heat of the sun warms the water, turning it into an invisible gas called water vapor. This process, the changing of water into a gas, is called evaporation. Because gases are lighter than liquids, water vapor rises up into the sky, and the further you move up and away from the Earth's surface, the colder the temperature gets. So in the sky, the water vapor cools, and changes back into tiny water droplets. This change is called condensation, and is the opposite of evaporation. Clouds are made up of tiny water droplets. So, when condensation occurs in the sky, clouds form and grow. Let's take a closer look. When water droplets bump into one another, they stick together and grow in size. They continue to grow until they are too heavy and fall as rain. They even grow as they bump into one another on their journey from the cloud to the ground, and every single raindrop that reaches the ground is made up of 1 million of the original tiny water droplets. Raindrops fall on the ground surface, or the sun can shine on them and the whole process happens again. This is called the water cycle, and keeps water moving from the ground to the sky, providing the water needed for plants, animals, and people to survive.
Because of the economic model, the newspaper industry has been shrinking drastically from the last 50 years of the 20th century in some states of America. Also, as the economic model changed, newspapers increased the cash flow. However, there are still some newspaper industries losing money because of a decrease in advertising and buyers. They can't find buyers. Only a few newspapers have positive cash flow. Over 100 newspapers with cash flow in red had no money to publish the newspaper every day. Some of them published 3 days per week. Small-sized newspapers only published once a week and had to go online. Some newspapers even disappeared. The staff working in newspaper industry decreased by 30 to 60% or more. There are 2 kinds of stress. The first one is little stress, which happens in special circumstances such as exams or other competitions, and can be considered as a motivation to improve performances. You always think about stress as a really bad thing, but it's not. Look on the bright side, and some stress is good for you. Stress can be something that makes you better, but it is a question of how much, how long and how you interpret or perceive it. The other one is what we usually talk about, caused by poor time management. Good time management is essential if you are to handle a heavy workload without excessive stress. Time management helps you to reduce long-term stress by giving you direction when you have too much work to do. It puts you in control of where you are going and helps you to increase your productivity. By being efficient in your use of time, you should enjoy your current work more, and should find that you are able to maximize the time outside work to relax and enjoy life. Poor time management is a major cause of stress. I'm sure we have all had the feeling that there is too much to do and not enough time. We can start to feel panicky and anxious and lose focus. It's important to note that you can have this feeling even if there's hardly anything to do at all. Hence, to release such stress, people could use a calendar to schedule and find a balance between play and work.
Sweetened condensed milk is a good ingredient for sweet recipes because of all the added sugar, about 25% by weight. But when sweetened condensed milk was invented in the 1800s, the original reason for adding sugar to the milk was not for flavor, but for protection against spoilage. And it works. Even after you open the can, sweetened condensed milk keeps longer than fresh milk. That added sugar kills bacteria that would otherwise digest the milk and spoil it. The sugar kills not by poisoning the bacteria, but by a more direct physical process. It draws water out of the bacteria so the bacterial cells shrivel and die. Each bacterial cell has a sort of skin, technically, a membrane. Water can pass through this membrane pretty easily, but substances dissolved in the water can't. Water has a natural tendency to move toward any region where there's a high concentration of dissolved substances. A bacterial cell in a can of sweetened condensed milk finds itself immersed in an extremely concentrated solution of sugar. Water inside the cell will, therefore, pass out through the cell membrane into the sugar solution. The bacterial cell dehydrates and dies in a sea of sugary water. Sugar added to fruit has the same effect. That's the idea behind fruit preserves. Other foods are preserved with salt, exploiting the same principle.